Wrexham are going to get relegated, and that's all you have to say. And then
I think when it comes to PSL...
What with the Red Bull wings?
Good one. We're cutting that bit out.
Wrexham are going to get relegated.
So should we just end the podcast there?
hello guys, and welcome back to the Sportsman Untitled. It's our final episode of the season, our championship end of season review, and I promise you we're going to talk about your team today. We're going to go through all 24 teams, give our opinions, the highs and lows, successes and losses throughout the year. Make sure you like and subscribe, get your thoughts in the comments below. We're going to have to start though, Gab. I'm joined by Gab Sutton and Conor McGilligan, by the way. Two great guests for you today. Gab, we've got to start with the playoff final, haven't we? Sunderland obviously getting promoted. Sheffield United, I think we should start with the heartbreak from Sheffield United.
Yeah, I think really difficult one. We'll hear from friend of the show, Ollie Mann from Sheffield United Way with his reaction shortly. But other than last season, any other championship season, 92 points gets you automatic promotion. And to accumulate, because that's what they accumulated, they ended up with 90 points because of the point deduction. But I think... Yeah, I think it's really disappointing for them. I think I really feel for Chris Wilder as well, because you could see when he was celebrating the opening goal what it meant to him as a Blade being at Wembley, and yeah, I think it's going to take some getting over missing out on promotion in those circumstances, but they're in a much better place, certainly on the field, than they were 12 months ago. Some real progress has been made, and I do have to credit Chris Wilder for that, but it's going to be hard to remember that right now because it's going to be very raw for everyone concerned. Absolutely.
Should we hear from Ollie, man? He sent a video over, quite an emotional one, I think, just 24 hours after that playoff final defeat. So let's hear what Ollie has to say.
Hi everybody, 24 hours after the fact, sending this one in, and wasn't sure if I was going to, if it's the right thing to do or not, so... Yeah, tough one to take. Obviously, to start off though, huge congratulations to Sunderland fans. They obviously have had a really difficult sort of few seasons. I think it's 8 years out of the Premier League, which for them obviously is massive. They're a really deserving fan base. Obviously, Johnny's a great guy, and it looked incredible to be over there yesterday, having those scenes at full time, enjoying that victory, enjoying that story, and just huge congratulations to them. Wish I knew what it felt like. From our perspective, just good. Just, it hurts, if I'm being honest. Felt like, it's 100 years since we last won at Wembley. Felt like this was the time, this was the culmination of that journey. This was catharsis. This was 10 playoff campaigns all building up to a moment. It was all the pain at old Wembley, all the pain at the Millennium Stadium, all the pain at new Wembley. Everything was building up for 100 years of waiting for a moment. Only to wait 3 minutes for VAR to take it all away from you. And it's hard to reflect on that. And, it'll take a long time. I think it'll just take a long time to get over that. So sucks. So congrats. The story's not United. The story shouldn't be about United. It should all be about Sunderland, their fans, their celebration. There'll be a time for us to analyse it, but still too raw at the minute. So it's not that moment. Just... congratulations to them. I wish them all the best for next season. Fingers crossed everything goes well, and obviously we can join them in the Premier League maybe next year if we get the opportunity. And have a great summer. I hope everybody has a great time. Been lovely doing the pod this year, and I suppose we'll see you next season.
Clearly very emotional and heartbroken there, Ollie, there, Conor. Can you sympathise with him? I mean, what a way to miss out on promotion for Sheffield United.
Yeah, well, we did it 12 months ago, and it's obviously I was down there at Wembley. It's heartbreak, it's horrendous. It's to do it the way it happened as well, for 70 minutes being in control, really, and for it to change the way it did, and it was just so poetic how it ended. Tom Watson leaving for Brighton, putting it in, the only bit of the goal that is going to go in, which Cooper's not going to get to. Some question marks around Cooper, to be fair, for that goal by a few Blades fans. But yeah, I sympathise with them a lot. Obviously, a bit of a wry grin from myself, because obviously we've finished where we've finished and we are champions. But yeah, I think they'll be back stronger again. They've got to learn from Leeds' lessons. We had an exodus in our first season. They've had the exact same thing. They've missed out in the playoff final, exactly like we did. They've got to recruit really, really well and expect sales, which makes it a lot harder. But yeah, I think they'll be back stronger, hopefully.
Conor, can I just ask you, you've seen both sides of it in terms of reaction to a heavy player final defeat, because, or sort of a difficult one to take, because on the one hand, last season you lost 3-0 to Southampton, I think it was, and you reacted with 100 points this season, won the league, which was brilliant. I think, 2006 you lost to Watford, and then relegated not long after that. So I suppose maybe that instance was dictated by off-field circumstance, but do you have some insight on the difference between teams that really react well to the heartache of a player final defeat versus the teams that maybe don't?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to recruitment. Again, it's really simple, Gab, but a lot of it does come down to recruitment. We got it spot on, but we don't know what Sheffield United owners are about. We saw a £10 million investment in Tom Cannon in January, but we don't know what they're about. Are they going to invest in the summer window? Are they not going to invest? I think that largely dictates what's going to happen next season. The division will be tougher. Look at the teams coming up. Look at the teams that have come down from the Premier League. I believe it will be tougher next season. So it's going to be a tougher job for Sheffield United, in my personal opinion, and we don't have the evidence yet. The plethora of what they're going to do in terms of an ownership. So I think it solely depends on that, to be honest, Gab. And if they'll back Chris Wilder, will he be in the job next season, which is another topic of conversation, I guess. I mean, don't know what your guys' thoughts are on that. I mean, I would stick with Chris Wilder, but new ownership, American ownership, who knows, they might see it as a failure. I doubt it, but...
Yeah, I think there is always that risk, isn't there, when people are coming in from the outside with no sort of connection to the club, that they might see it a certain way. I think that they do need that stability. I do think that Chris Wilder is the right person to move. I think after delivering a 92-point haul this season, I don't think that's really up for conversation, but maybe the ownership will see it differently, and that's kind of the chaotic nature of management, isn't it, really?
I agree with you. I think they're going to have some key exits as well, which will harm them in terms of maybe Paymer leaving. Vinny Souza probably expected to leave as well. It's how they replace them. You're bang honest about recruitment. It's quite a somber start to the podcast, isn't it? Because we need to celebrate Sunderland making it up to the Premier League. Let's hear from Johnny from Roker Report, because he sent a video with very different vibes to the one Ollie sent.
It's happened. Sunderland's finally back in the Premier League. I can't actually believe it, to be honest. I'm just on cloud nine. Been floating around London like, can't be brought down, nothing that touches. It doesn't really feel real. It feels like it's a dream. I can't believe it. It's the most dramatic, tense, nerve-shredding, horrific game of football I've ever watched. And if I ever have to repeat that experience, I think I might actually die. But an amazing way to do it. And what a moment for Tommy Watson as well. He's taken a bit of stick towards the back end of the season, but 19-year-old, been at the club for 14 years, scoring the winner in the 95th minute to send Sunderland back to the Premier League at Wembley. Just, it doesn't get better than that. I'm not thinking about next season at all. I'm just trying to pretend that we don't really have to play a season in the Premier League. I'm just enjoying getting there. And yeah, it's all just, it'll start slowly sinking in, I think, when the fixtures come out. But until then, I'm just gonna enjoy this and revel in the moment. Commiserations to Sheffield United as well. I mean, it's tough to win 92 points in a season and not go up. But the grit, the determination, the fight that the lads have shown across both legs of the semi and then across the final as well, turning up when it counts in the biggest moments for one of the youngest teams one of the youngest teams in the country, turn up and do that speaks volumes of the character of each and every one of them. And we need to start work on the Luke O'Nien and Reggie Slabry statues immediately, if not sooner. Sunderland are in the Premier League. How are the lads?
There you go, Gab. I mean, he's a very happy boy down in London. We spoke to him ahead of the final. He was a happy boy then. He's probably had a few drinks in him as well. I mean, what a way to win a playoff final. The Mayenda goal was just utterly superb. And as they did in the semi-final, they performed in the big moments.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Elisa Mayenda his value has skyrocketed over the last 12 months. I think when I did my summer deep dive with Johnny last summer, I'm not sure we really mentioned Mayenda because he came to Sunderland as a young lad. He didn't really, he'd been part of Spain's under-19 squad, but he didn't really have much senior football experience. But it feels as though this year he's added a bit of upper body strength to his game, and that's allowed him to kind of just drive past the post opponents, and it's made him much better equipped to deal with the physical nature of Championship football and therefore show his talent. And again, it's just an example of this brilliant model that Sunderland have got. And I hope now that the sporting director, Christian Speakman, sometimes earlier on in his reign, Sunderland fans have maybe questioned him in terms of the balance between youth and experience, but in the long run, it's massively paid off investing in young talent and developing those players. And I think Sunderland have benefited from it on the pitch, winning promotion, of course, and I think they might just benefit from it off the pitch now as well.
After 70 minutes, Conor, you already touched upon it. It only looked like there was going to be one winner, and it certainly wasn't Sunderland. How have they done this?
Slice of luck, I'd say. In that first half, obviously, we saw the VAR ruling, which, I don't know, harsh, but still, you roll with the punches. Should VAR be administered in a Championship playoff final when it's not been administered at all throughout the season, even in the semi-finals, of course? It's a conversation to be had, definitely. That outstanding save by Patterson from Kiefer Moore in the first couple of minutes, which is just a world-class save. So they rode the luck a little bit, but that's what you've got to do in football. And what a story. What a way to... And I was having a conversation with my mates, what's the best way to win it? Obviously, we did it in the last minute by winning the league. Burnley will win it, and then we scored in the last minute. Or is it doing what you did in the last 20 minutes at Wembley against the grain? For 70% of the game, you think to yourself, it's not happening, and then you go and do it last minute. One of your sons has left the club, but that's how he's left. It's iconic. So I'm really happy for them. Massive club. Hopefully it's going to do something for the Premier League as well. And hopefully ignite a bit of a shift, of which we're speaking about off air. But just talking about Meander, I think it's really helped as well. Almost Isidore getting a lot of the notoriety really this season. Obviously 12 goals this season. I think he's been excellent, Isidore. But then Meander has almost come in his shadow, hasn't he? I think they work really well as a two together. But that finish at the weekend, the finish against what he did against Coventry as well, especially at the CBS. I think he's an outstanding... If he was in the Championship next year, I'd probably back him to be top scorer. Yeah, I think he's really developed in so many areas of his game. So
the other thing I'd have to say is well done to Regis Lebris for his substitutions, because we've spoken...
I can't believe he didn't start Patrick Roberts, by the way. When I saw that, I was like...
He's not been great, though, has he? He's not been great.
Chris Rigg on the right wing as well. Yeah. What did I say, eh?
Didn't work, though, did it? Didn't work at all. Yeah.
Not at all.
I think it's funny because we've had Johnny on the podcast and we've said Regis Lebris has done some amazing work this season. Maybe the one question mark would be in-game management. Well, he certainly come up trumps in that area at the crucial moment, because I think I would have probably, if I was in his shoes, been tempted to start Wilson Isidore with Elisa Meander and Romain Mundle and have Enzo Lafille feeding them in. But I think what Lebris has wanted was actually have a game changer or two on the bench, bring on Patrick Roberts, bring on Wilson Isidore. And I think going to two up top, immediately it occupied Sheffield United's defenders, where I think Sheffield United from substitutions, I think that made them weaker. I think with Sunderland, their substitutions made them stronger, and that ultimately was the difference.
I think he was quite lucky though that the game was in the balance. I was watching and I couldn't believe he didn't start Isidore. When you look at the Stadium of Light at the fixture there when they beat them 2-1, Isidore span an L. Put him on his, put it in the bottom corner, lovely finish. Meander was brilliant in that game as well. I thought he'd have gone like for like against Robinson. And Anel didn't do that. So I did think he was a little bit lucky that the game was still in the balance. But the substitutions worked a treat, didn't they? Watson and Isidore and Roberts. I mean, that's pretty good to bring off the bench as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we're also fortunate that Hamer went off injured yet again in a playoff final. And happened 2 years ago when Coventry lost to Luton with 10 minutes left, changed the game. Happened again when they were in control and Brereton Diaz came on and it kind of ruined the balance of the team. It looked and
Ty Campbell coming off was huge as well. Yes. And I just want a special mention as well to that Try Hume tackle on Brereton Diaz, which was brilliant.
I thought, what I thought was Chris Wilder was almost applauding it, even though it was against his own player. I think he's such an old school manager that he liked it that much in a playoff final, and he was like, I like that.
Great tackle.
Absolutely. Congratulations to Sunderland. Congratulations to Johnny. What a way to do it. And Ollie, at least you can come back on the show next year, eh? It's not all bad. We'll see you next year in the Championship. Right, we're going to start our run through and our season review of the rest of the teams in the Championship. And I guess, Conor, we should start at the top, shouldn't we? 100-point seasons for both Burnley and Leeds, we should mention. Leeds going up as champions, two of the best teams we've ever seen at this level.
Yeah, it feels weird because it's been done for like, 2.5, 3 weeks now. So we've not really known what to do. Obviously, the playoffs have come, the playoffs have gone, but it just feels like as Leeds and Burnley, it's just kind of been a bit like, all right, it's done. That was it, you know? So, yeah, it's been brilliant. It's jubilant, obviously. As I say, it feels like a long time ago now. But, yeah, two of the best teams, I think, when you look at Burnley's defence, outstanding. And you look at them when Marcus Edwards came in, I thought he added a new dimension to them in January. Obviously, them now getting him on a permanent is absolutely massive for Burnley, I think. I think it's a really top addition. Probably should have touched on Enzo Lafay going to Sunderland as well on a permanent fee now. But, yeah, I think with Leeds, look, I think we'd have broken the points record. I think we would have done. I think if we didn't, look, always striving for perfection, of course, but I think we'd have broken the points record. And the reason I'm saying that is because I just think we have been so good this year that even just like a few changes, maybe at the rear guard, Leeds United would have seen an absolute eclipse of that points tally. So
how many? More than Birmingham's 111?
I think it'd have been close. I think we'd have got more than Reading's 106.
I agree.
Definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think I look at the amount of sort of like unforced errors, and I think to myself, that would have definitely swung the other way. But yeah, really, really proud of the lads. Excellent. And we go into the Premier League with some serious momentum, and I think a good framework, I'd say, loosely.
Do you think, you mentioned the word framework there, do you think in terms of the off-field structure, because this was the question mark around Leeds United at the end of their Premier League tenure, do you think that the infrastructure at the club is strong now and ready for the Premier League?
I do, yeah. The San Francisco 49ers in Enterprises in complete control, getting more investors on board. Obviously Red Bull are in the background as well. I think it's there for lift-off with Leeds. I think when it comes to PSR...
What, with the Red Bull wings?
Good one. We're cutting that bit out. No, but yeah, I think when you look at it and you look at the investment, the investors coming in as well, there's a really good capital there, really good people behind the scenes as well. So, and a trust in Daniel Farke, trust in the playing staff as well. So I think there's a lot of really good things coming, hopefully, for Leeds United. And look, we work around the PSR restraints, which I think Leeds are going to be able to do because of the assets that we've got at the club. Some of them that aren't even playing. You know, when you kind of look at Melier, maybe Strauk, Matteo Joseph, hopefully not, but touch wood, but Willie Nyonto, players of that ilk, they could be sold on, could work against PSR.
Would Matteo Joseph get a championship loan, do you think?
I think he'd get a La Liga move. Betis are looking at him, apparently, only rumours, but yeah, so I think there's a lot of conversations there, and I think there's the owners have said, if we will work around that, and when we work around that, we will spend as much as we can. So, but we know the gap between the Premier League, don't we, and the Championship. So, but I think we'll give it a good go.
I think there were slightly different expectations in the managers, in particular, Daniel Farke and Scott Parker, before the season started. I think we have to give Scott Parker so much credit for not only getting this Burnley side up, but getting them 100 points and putting together the best defence we've ever seen in the Championship.
Absolutely unbelievable. If I look for statistics on teams that have conceded the few, I think the only one that came close was the Preston Invincibles in the 1888-89 season, and that was only because they played a lot fewer games. So the number, like, it's just unbelievable to have that defensive record. And yes, they've had James Trafford in goal, who's had a wonderful campaign off the back of a difficult Premier League stint, by the way. Yeah, I think that centre half, that's the other thing. It's like you got James Trafford, who's a very young goalkeeper. I mean, by the way, when he went to the Premier League, it was jumping up from League One with Bolton Wanderers. You've got Maxime Estev, who's very young. You've got CJ Egan-Riley, who's another talented. So that you'd normally associate that kind of defensive resilience with having players who are really experienced.
Bashir Humphries as well.
Exactly, yeah. So I think to be able to drill that team into such an organised unit, absolutely every credit to Scott Parker. And I questioned Burnley from a sustainability perspective earlier in the campaign, and I feel a bit sheepish about it now because they've defied their doubters, certainly.
Conor, for you, now we know the three teams going up, and we've spoken about the gap before between the Championship and the Premier League. Who do you think's the best setup to try and stay up next season? We were saying you'd rather be Burnley under Parker than Burnley under Company going into the Premier League, which I think is a key point. But do you think Leeds have got the best crack at it? Yeah,
I'd probably say so. I just think that maybe you would argue that the nucleus of the side, maybe more Leeds players were able to adapt to the Premier League in terms of quality. Obviously, we've got the highest wage structure. Normally that reflects quality in the side. And I think a lot of Burnley fans will probably admit that. I think Leeds are probably the best setup, but we've not been through a transfer window yet. We have no idea. But yes, I would say so. I think there's probably about 6 or 7 Leeds players who could maybe acclimatise into the Premier League. We need a lot adding still, but I would suggest maybe that with the youth and exuberance of Sunderland, that is, they have the quality and the potential and the trajectory to play in the Premier League. But do you need more right now? Do you need experience? Do you need potentially Premier League proven players? I think Sunderland are going to need a lot, and they've got quality players, especially, we're looking at potentially Joe Bellingham moving on. There's rumours with him and Frankfurt and Dortmund. That would be massive, because I think he's a player who actually can fit into the Premier League right now. And there's a lot of tinkering that needs to be done with Sunderland, but they have the PSR availability to really invest right now, which is big. Burnley, yes, they're set up better for me because Vincent Kompany, it felt very Vincent Kompany's way, philosophy. I'm not changing, similarly to that of Russell Martin that we've seen this year, which is a problem, and managers have to adapt. And we might have seen that with Enzo Maresca at Leicester if he'd have stayed. Yeah. I think Parker will adapt. I think he will be pragmatic. I'd worry a little bit about that defence being broken up. CG, Egan, Riley, Trafford and Net. That would be my big worry. It's because it's replacing that. And then have Burnley really faced the quality that they will face week in, week out in the Premier League with the offensive action? They won't.
Because, you watch Championship games live every week, Conor being Leeds United fan, of course. I think as much as Burnley have been amazing defensively, I would also argue that in the Championship this season, we've seen maybe a dearth of absolute top-tier centre-forwards in the same way that there have been this plethora of brilliant goal scorers in previous seasons. I've not really seen that this year. So, is there that in the equation as well?
100%. I don't think, obviously, top goal scorer, Golden Boot, Joel Perew, I think he's been decent this season. I think he's been good. But Golden Boot, it's like, wow, okay. You got Josh Brownhill on 18 goals. Sargent been out for a massive amount of time, getting in team of the seasons for pretty much everybody. What's he on, 15, 16 goals?
Yeah.
There's been, like you said, there's been a real gap for a striker scoring a lot of goals. So yeah, when it comes to that, I agree with you. Leeds have not really conceded that many chances as well, to be honest, at the back. I think it mirrors that of Burnley. I think the big difference is Trafford and Melier.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, there's been a real lack, I think. I agree, when it comes to the rest of the division. And the big thing for me is when you're looking up against Bristol City and Sheffield United in that playoffs, and you kind of looked at a forward line, and there was, with the greatest of respect, Nahki Wells up there, Scott Twine, and I was kind of looking at it and I was thinking it's a playoff team really, and they've been really good this season, but that's the offensive, set up really, and it's nowhere near what we've seen maybe previous years.
It's a nice link actually, because we are going to move on to discuss the playoff sides that lost in the semi-finals, and Bristol City. We'll just start with them, Gab, because they've done really, really well this season. They've overperformed. They've managed to get up from this mid-table position we always joke about into the playoff picture. Now it looks like Liam Manning may be departing, rumours linking him with Norwich. Have they missed their boat and they'll one crack at it, or can they keep this as more of a sustained push to be in those places again over the next coming seasons?
I think it depends on presuming Manning does go, which it sounds like that could be likely. It depends on who they replace him with and how well they replace him. I think they've certainly benefited from that low bar, and we'll come on to talk about West Bromwich Albion and Middlesbrough and how they've dropped off and kind of paving the way for Bristol City. I think for them, what they've probably got right is Jason Knight. I looked on Bristol Live, and that they did a fan Q&A with all the Cider Army, if you like, and everyone had Jason Knight as Player of the Year for Bristol City because of that incredible work ethic that he's brought for them in midfield. But I mean, again, a little bit similar to what we've talked about in terms of attacking players in the Championship. I'm almost feeling a little bit in terms of players who really brought that X factor in the final third. I'm felt a little bit underwhelmed, and I suppose that's kind of epitomised by Bristol City getting into the playoffs with Nahki Wells. He's produced some nice finishes this season, but I wouldn't say he's been an unbelievable centre forward. I think Max Bird has probably been Bristol City's best attacking player. I've liked his link-up play. I wouldn't say they've been really strong in terms of the wing-back areas. Scott Twine. So I would probably say, yes, Bristol City have had a solid framework and they've looked after the ball well and they've done the simple things well, but they've missed that little bit of X factor in the final third. And I think they're probably a mid-table team or a sort of top half team that's kind of benefited from that low bar. So great season for Bristol City, first top six finish at this level since 2008. So real progress there. Well done to Liam Manning. But I also think that things have fallen for them a little bit as well.
I agree with that. I think the other team we need to talk about is Coventry, Conor, because unlike Bristol City, there was a very real chance they could have been playoff finalists this season. Obviously, Ballard scored that last-minute goal for Sunderland. What do you make of them, especially with the change this season? Mark Robins leaving, Frank Lampard coming in. Big change there, but it feels like a club that can still progress next season.
And there's a lot of positivity for Coventry, which you'll like. But I think there's a lot of talent there. Lampard at championship level seems to be a good man manager, a good motivator. And I think that switch from Robins to him worked. I do think it worked. You look at the end of season form record, I think at one point they'd won 10 in 12, which is staggering form in the championship, albeit in my opinion it's been a weaker league. But I think they've got a lot of components there of which can be a success. I think if they keep hold of Jack Redone, it's massive. If you get one more season out of him, I think it's going to be really important for Cov. Hadji Wright, can he be there for the full season in terms of, actually maintaining his position in the side? I'm still confused as to where his best position is, to be honest with you. It still confuses me. A man of that stature and size being put on the left wing at points, but still him and Ellis Sims, is that a combination that's going to be fruitful going forward? I think Matt Grimes in that midfield as a conductor is really positive. I think they've got a lot. I think they've got a lot there. Maybe wing backs they need to focus on a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot there. I'm liking what I see from Coventry. I spoke to a Coventry fan the other day and said to me, what do you think going into next season? I think it'll be strong again. I think it'll be really strong. It's just keeping that component, keeping hold of Lampard. And can Lampard utilise those connections again, which we've seen him do before at championship level for his second season at Cov?
Well, I was just going to ask, Simon, do you have much faith in the recruitment at Coventry City? Because you've got a network of key players there like Milan van Ewijk and Jack Redone, who Conor mentioned there. Do you have faith in the recruitment team to get those last 4 or 5 additions to go into the best 11 that's going to make you a strong candidate next season? It's
been really interesting because it's almost been hit and miss in terms of pretty much 50-50 split in terms of the money we've spent on players like Ellis Sims and Thomas Asante hasn't been worth what we've spent on them so far. And there's probably going to be a bit of an overturn in players in terms of getting rid of some of those players, trying to get some money and then spend elsewhere. Aside from Jack Redone, Bobby Thomas potentially has been pretty good as well. Most of our success in the past few years has come from signing players from Europe. You just get better value. Yeah. You can then sell them on a higher price. You look at Hamer. I know Gyökeres didn't come from Europe, but he had a loan spell at St. Pauli. Even Hadji Wright has been a pretty successful signing on the whole. If we can keep hold of him as well, he's probably the 20-goal-a-season striker we need. If you just play him up front and he can stay fit, it's obviously the thing that most people in the league are looking for. So
Sakamoto, Wright and Mason Clark is the front three, isn't it? That's the threat.
With Redone as the number 10, you'd think that would have enough to...
Yeah. He is, on his day, he's... I don't know if I'd say lower ebb Premier League player, but I love how he moves. I love his delivery, his balance, his low centre of gravity. I think Sakamoto's a real player. You get the physicality in and around the box, pick up those second balls on the edge of the area. Matt Grimes, Redone, I think there's a lot there for Cov, I do. But yeah, it's, as you say, it's just key bits in recruitment. And as Gab said, it's that final piece of the puzzle, isn't it? And it seems to have been a problem this season for a few of the top-ish sides.
Absolutely. Probably need a goalkeeper because Dovin's out with an ACL injury till December. Probably a left-back upgrade and potentially some striker investment as well. Let's move on to a couple of the teams that did miss out on the playoffs, Gab. Blackburn Rovers did finish just outside the playoffs. What a crazy season for them. I mean, John Eustace, incredible, exceeded all expectations. Then he leaves, we all think they're going to fall apart. They kind of do a bit under his belt. And then at the end of the season, they just win every week. What on earth?
I'm still trying to work Blackburn Rovers out. I still would say that losing John Eustace was a blow. I would make the statement that if they'd kept John Eustace for the remainder of the season, Blackburn Rovers would have finished in the top 6, possibly over Bristol City. Wow. I think that there's definitely a lesson for Blackburn Rovers in terms of the board or key personnel upstairs to really value high-performing head coaches. When you've got someone who's getting great results, communicate with them, give them some transparency. And one thing that I find quite confusing about the Venkies is that on the one hand, they're very absent and it's hard to read them and know what they're going to do because they don't communicate very often. But on the other hand, why don't you just sell the club? If they're not serving a purpose for you and you're not passionate about helping Blackburn Rovers move forward, just sell the club and give it to somebody who can take the club forward. So that's how I feel about it. I think Valérien Ismaël, there's some encouraging signs from what he's done in the last month or so of the campaign. I think they've got some players like Callum Britton, who he had at Barnsley, like Yuki Ihashi, who I'm a big fan of, who I think he can really work with his style of play. But for the Venkies, just sell the club and give it to someone who can give them the sustainable foundations that it's been crying out for.
We were both worried about them potentially being relegation threatened at the start of the season because of the off the field issues. They sold Sami Spodek, obviously the top scorer in the Championship last season. It's easy to forget that happened, and I think there was a lot of negativity, and they've kind of managed to ride that out and be playoff candidates for most of the season, Conor. Some smart signings like Todd Cantwell as well, which I really like that as a pickup for the club. I just don't have the positivity about them moving forward, and I don't know if that comes from the underlying ownership issues. How do you feel about that?
It's trickle down. Everything's trickle down. It is, of course it is. And you know, you look at Ismaël and you look at that Barnsley side, Daryl Dike and co, what he managed to do with that side and his philosophy, and they all bought into it. Can he replicate that again, or was that just crystallised for Barnsley? I'm not 100% sure, but if he can replicate that again, if they can back him, but it's the Venkies, isn't it? So you've no idea what's going to happen. You've absolutely no idea what's going to happen. We know with John Eustace, if you read between the lines, he maybe didn't feel backed and positive with the future projection of Blackburn, which when he left in his 6th, 7th, how can they not deliver some sort of positive projection? If you get here, this will happen. And he left to go to relegation-threatened Derby. I know there's obviously the history with Derby, but it's bonkers how they didn't manage to keep hold of him.
But do you know what the difference is? It's David Close at Derby.
Yeah,
I don't think David Close is necessarily. I think he has been a bit of a reluctant opener for Derby County, but the one thing he offers is communication, and you know where you stand with him. And I think if you've got somebody like John Eustace who has got those kind of values, where you're an honest, down-to-earth person and you want to work with people who you know where you stand with, you're going to want to spend your day-to-day life in that sort of environment. So I think in some ways it's bonkers, in other ways it actually makes perfect sense.
And you'd also look at Paul Warne, wouldn't you? If you used to go in there and you'd look at the almost backing that Paul Warne had and the relationship he obviously had with the chairman, and you think, right, okay, there's something there that I can establish and then maybe work into next season. With Blackburn, it feels short-term consistently, but I had him in 17th at the start of the season after they lost Schmodek. So, yeah, there's...
I had them bottom.
Ty Dolan, Cantwell, there are players there. There are players there, but it's trickle-down effect always in football.
Absolutely. A team we can be more positive about is Millwall. I think they've had a really good season. Conor, I think Alex Neil's been a really good appointment. I think if you look at Ivanovic, striker I really like. He's only 20 years old. I always forget. I think he got 11 or 12 goals this season. If they can keep hold of him, I know he's got interest from Lazio and Roma, I think, are interested, which kind of speaks to the level he could get to. If we're looking for these number 9s in the Championship, he could be one of them. Tanganga, superb at the back. This feels like a club that they are building something. I'd put them more in the Coventry category than the Blackburn category at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And it does feel with Millwall, we always underestimate them, don't we? We always think that the league is going to eat them up, that, obviously they've never been to the Premier League and all these teams that come down and then the money comes down with them and all this sort of stuff. And even if they stay in the Championship, they've still got more money than Millwall. And obviously Harris leaving, I kind of raised a bit of an eyebrow at that, to be honest. I thought, okay, I don't know how this one's going to go, club man. But once again, they've done what Millwall do, backs up against the wall. Alex Neil has come in, an efficient Championship manager, and they all seem really positive. The end scene there, Burnley, they'd missed out on the playoffs, and they're all chanting Alex Neil's name, they're clapping, and they're loving it, and there's a real positivity there. It's a massive achievement, again, for Millwall to finish where they've finished. The perennial, overachievers, I think, at Championship level, and they'll be hoping at one point they can get into the playoffs. And I tell you what, if they'd have got into the playoffs, you'd have got Sheffield United going, oh no, because that is the team you do not want to face. They're a big problem, I think, in competition because the atmosphere they create, and of course the plucky little Millwall tag, which they really shouldn't have anymore.
I think I'm so excited for the future of Millwall under Alex Neil, because it's one thing that I've kind of deliberated for a long time over Millwall, this kind of middle ground, because I've felt for a while that the Neil Harris get the team fighting and make the Den a fortress and rely really on being very combative. I felt like that had a ceiling as to how far they could go. But on the other hand, when they've experimented with coaches who didn't know how, like a Joe Edwards, who didn't know how to implement their ideas in a way that the home fans were going to respond well to, I think that was too far the other side of the spectrum. I think they absolutely hit the sweet spot right on the nose with Alex Neil, because he's an experienced Championship manager who knows how to get teams battling and to build really energetic, tenacious sides. But on the other hand, he's shown he can develop players like he did at Preston North End and Hamilton even as well. So I think that's a really exciting thing. And then I like what James Berylson is trying to do, and Steve Gallen as well, in terms of investing in young players on long-term contracts. And I think the value in the squad, they've got Lace Williams, Bangura Williams on a 5-year deal this summer. So that shows that your top young prospects are saying, yes, I want to be at Millwall. This is the place for my development. And that as a starting point, I think is fantastic.
Absolutely good stuff. 9th for West Brom in the end. Would they have been top 6 had Corberán stayed the whole season?
Probably won the league, for being honest.
Josh Madrid scored about 15 goals in about 10 games, didn't he?
Yeah, he's outstanding, isn't he? Just go look at the job he's done. He's done at Valencia. Carlos Corberán. I know you were jumping in there to say so, but
two best strikers in the Championship from the first half of the season would be a Sergeant Major partnership.
Oh, very good. That's why we have him on for the puns. He often have a drink of water to try and respond to that. I just think it's so disappointing from a Baggy's point of view, isn't it, that he did decide to move on, Conor. I know, obviously, Valencia, massive club, and it's worked out to be a great move for him. You can't really turn it down. But the way it kind of unravelled a little bit after that, and obviously the Mowbray appointment hasn't worked out at all because he's now left the club.
It's two very contrasting styles, isn't it? When you look at Mowbray, two very different personalities, and it's not to say like, you know, they're both individual in their own way, but it was a real tail off towards the end of the season. They've got a lot of quality. Again, West Bromwich Albion, is it going to be a summer of turnover again?
Look at the players they've lost on a free already.
Yeah, already.
Swift's left, Wallace has left, hasn't he?
Yeah.
You look at those players that are leaving, and you already look at that team and think the experience is kind of maybe teetering over to the edge of where they're not performing at their best anymore.
Wonder if there's going to be sort of heavy investment as well, though, because relatively new owners, aren't they, at West Bromwich Albion? So you do kind of wonder in that aspect of it.
Well, I think one thing I do quite like about the new owner, Singh, is that he does seem to want to invest very sensibly, and he's got the long-term future in mind, which I think is really valuable. But I think it was a bit of a wrong turn going for Mowbray, because I think what's happened is while they've actually delivered a few more tonkings than they did under Corberán, and at their best at home, they could blow teams away, they also didn't sort of draw enough games. So you know how under Corberán they would often get 5 points from 3 games or 7 points from 4 games, and it's that ticking over points and getting a draw if you're not quite at your best.
Very difficult to beat, weren't they?
They lost that, and I think if you've got that element, you get into the top 6 in this Championship season quite comfortably. But I think they lost that with Mowbray, and so again, I think for the summer I'll be looking at somebody like Steve Cooper, because I think Cooper can build a really balanced team that can play a little bit of football, but also has that really resolute side to them. And I think that's what West Bromwich Albion need to rediscover.
I think they lost away games too easily, and I think it's Dean Garner who's left on a free rather than Jed Wallace, so my mistake on that one. But I think you're right with West Brom, they weren't hard enough to beat away from home. People were rolling them over quite easily, and that's why they slid down the table. Biggest underperformers potentially for me, Conor, Middlesbrough. I mean, underlying numbers were brilliant, a lot of excitement, a great squad, and they finished 10th.
Yeah, I don't know what they were on XG, but at one point they were ahead of us. They were ahead of anybody in the division, you know, on XG. I'm pretty sure that was late on as well. But Yeah, I mean, when they came to Ellen Road, just from a personal standpoint, they were one of the best teams that we played this season. We obviously beat them 3-1, but it was a real tough game for Leeds, that one. So they had it in their arsenal. With Ben Doak was massive, obviously. You know, I know I've got it down the notes here, but Ben Doak was huge. But they've got a lot of potential in that side, using that word again. But it's a failure. It's a failure. You know, some of the big January moves again. Iheanacho being a huge one.
They didn't work, did they?
They just didn't work.
Yeah.
Whittaker didn't work again.
Iheanacho made them worse because he made Izaz have to sometimes play on the left.
Yeah.
And they lost Blatelath and Ben Doak, which was the team. I know they were still underperforming their underlying numbers, but they were a better team with those two in the team.
I think for me with Middlesbrough is they possibly, certainly in January, the recruitment policy was putting too much weight on individual talent and not enough on selflessness, work ethic. And you know, I look at players like Kelechi Iheanacho and Morgan Whittaker, who I think left Plymouth Argyle in quite ethically questionable circumstances. I just think you need to, they already had a lot of talent and they already had a system for creating chances. But I just felt like they needed that balance with players who would really give everything and had the right work ethic. And I think there's something to be said for doing a big, rigorous character profiling in recruitment. I'm just not quite sure Middlesbrough got that. And that's why they just crumbled at the business end. And that's the thing I think Middlesbrough have got to take very seriously this summer.
Michael Carrick's probably looking like he's going to stick around or certainly not walk away from the job. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. But Hayden Hackney, Aidan Morrison and Finn Azaz seems like a top 6 championship midfield to me. So you look all over the pitch and it is just a real disappointment season for Borough. Swansea, Gab. Alan Sheehan comes in, wins every week, and they end up finishing in the top half.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's been great about Alan Sheehan is that bit of adaptability, that finding different ways to hurt teams and cut teams open. I think that made a big difference. I'm encouraged by what I've seen from Alan Sheehan in terms of coaching talent so far. I'm reluctant to go too big too early on him because I think there's an example over the road with Omar Ritza at Cardiff City. Sometimes managers can have
purple patches, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And also I think when somebody new comes in, it's a fresh voice. The players want to impress them early on. And I think Alan Sheehan's had the, the honeymoon period, if you like. How good is he going to be over a full season? I think is still a valid question for us still to be answered. But an encouraging start for them. I would like to see a bit of change for Swansea City off the field. I think there's a bit of murmurings of discontent around the ownership side of things and the perceived lack of investment, and I think it's felt like things have plateaued a little bit. So still a few question marks for Swansea City, but they do end the season with a top half finish, so I think that's a respectable achievement in the end.
How much money does Luka Modric have is the question we all need to ask ourselves.
Or could he dig his boots out?
Yeah, exactly. Probably do a job, wouldn't he, in the midfield?
Replace Matt Grimes.
Sheffield Wednesday. Conor, I just feel like they're missing, or they've missed now, the Danny Roll Express, I like to call it. I feel like he might have been their ticket to a top 6 finish and potentially the Premier League. I just feel like the off-the-field issues always lingering at that club, and they might have now missed this once in a generation manager. Yeah,
and obviously looking at, there's lots Sheffield Wednesday, where do you start? But you look at Josh Windass in particular. Obviously, it looks like he's going to be moving on. 12 goals this season, so not a bad campaign for them. For him, sorry. Sheffield Wednesday, though, I think it's a very poor squad. I think I personally think it is a really poor squad. I think Danny Roll has done a really decent job with the tools at his disposal. There's not that much to develop on with Sheffield Wednesday, I should say. I think you take Danny Roll out of it. I maybe would look at Muslic at Plymouth. I think that's not a bad fit. But I would, early prediction, I'd really worry about Sheffield Wednesday next season without Danny Roll.
I agree with you because I think it's very difficult to replace a coach of Danny Roll's talent and pedigree, and I do still see a huge future for him in the game based on what I've seen from him over the last 18 months. At the same time, I also think Danny Roll has to go for all parties. I think he has to go for his own career, and I think he has to go for Sheffield Wednesday because he's made it so clear that he wants to leave. I just don't see a world where how can you go back at Melwood and sort of motivate everyone when you've made it clear that you want to leave. So it's sort of got to happen. And so go on.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think that I think he was very much looking at the Southampton job, wasn't he? There was a lot of murmurings for a couple of months that he was sort of eyeing that job, and maybe they were looking at him as well. And obviously Will Still coming in, taking over the reins there is probably been a bit of a blow. So I don't really know what happens now. There's obviously rumours of Russell Martin taking over at Leicester. I don't know where the move is for Danny Roll right now. So maybe it's back in Germany. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, I think Sheffield Wednesday, I think a few problems if he's leaving, to be honest. They have to get the profile of manager right, of course, but try emulate Danny Roll as much as you can.
I like it to Luke Williams at Swansea, where when there was murmurs of interest around Christmas time of West Brom being interested in Luke Williams to replace Carlos Corberán, I think Williams went quite sort of semi-public, if you like, in his interest in the West Brom job. Yeah. And I think as a manager that's doing well, you've got to be very careful to be extremely respectful to the club that's paying your wages right now, or not in Sheffield Wednesday's case at times. But I think you've got to be very careful about that, because if you burn your bridges too much and say you want and make it clear you want to leave, and then the move that you want to happen doesn't happen, you can create an awkward situation. So that's what I would say on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Obviously, we're in the kind of summer transfer window manager mayhem. We don't know what's going to happen, where they're going to end up. Very unlikely, it feels, that Danny Roll will be at Sheffield Wednesday at the start of the new season. My word, another crazy team. Conor, I'll come to them first. I remember back in October, November, Borja Sainz had scored maybe 15 goals in about 12 games. Norwich were flying. Josh Sargent got injured. They also had problems with John Rowe at the start of this season when he left. They've had so many issues this season, and they've ended up sacking another manager, and now they're looking for another manager. Johannes Hofthorup out the door at the end of the season. What a mental season, and probably again, like Middlesbrough, an underperformance from Norwich, given the attackers they have.
I had them finishing third.
Did you?
So should we just end the podcast there? I, right at the beginning of the season, which was absolutely startling. Now, when I've looked back at it, obviously it was before a lot of the business went on. But I just looked at what they had going forward. Obviously, you just mentioned, a few there as well, but signs in particular, Sargent, Marcelino Nunes.
They'd have had Rowe at the time. You read the predictions.
Johnny Rowe at the time as well.
Was Gabi Sarr still there at the start of the season?
Yeah.
When you made me win. It's just sad then to make your prediction. James Maddison was still there. Grant Holt. Yeah, Grant Holt was still there.
But yeah, so there was obviously a few still there at that point, but you kind of look going forward and they were electric. They really were electric when it comes to quality. And I always think Norwich are there and thereabouts, a really well supported club, a really well run club as well. So yeah, absolutely bizarre. And I think it was a failure. I think maybe Zoe Webber, some Norwich fans will let us know in the comment section below, but I think someone on the board anyway came out and said it was effectively in the programme notes a bit of a failure. And I think Thorup saw that as a bit of no, I don't think it was a failure. We're building, we're in those building blocks to next season. So I think there was clearly a bit of conflict within the boardroom and what Thorup actually thought was the objective. So yeah, but massive underachieves. I think that it's still a very decent. It's not a 13th place squad, is it, Gab, at all?
No. There's part of me though that saw what Norwich delivered under Thorup in the first 3 months of the season, and I feel a little bit disappointed that he hasn't been able to build on it. And I think a combination of injuries in the middle third of the season and the sort of permutations at the end of the season where Norwich didn't really have anything to play for, I think they were possibly better than 13th, even though that is where they finished. But I think
they finished sixth with Wagner.
I think it's worse. I think their issue was they started really well and obviously were scoring a lot of goals. I think the issue came that when Sargent came back from injury, everyone thought, right, they can kick off. They're in contention to push for that fifth or sixth place. And they got worse. I think that's where his issue was.
Yeah, and I think Ben Napper did speak to that when he spoke to Pinken and the sort of external media at the end of the season, that it was the fact that they weren't improving towards the end of the campaign. And there is some criticism to be levelled at Thorup. But what I really want to see Norwich City being a club that develops develops young players and plays attractive football. I think that's something that Norwich City should really strive to stand for. And so there's part of me that's disappointed that I'm not sure Liam Manning is a very developmental coach necessarily. I don't think he's got that kind of thirst for youth development that I would associate with somebody like Daniel Farke when he was at Norwich. So that's my apprehension about them going down a different route, because I really want to see them being a club that develops young players, and I'm not sure how much we'll see that.
It's a huge catchment area as well, isn't it? When you look at some of the really, the successes they've had when it comes to the youth development, when you look at Aarons, when you look at Lewis, Godfrey could kind of put in that bracket as well. I think I completely agree with you there. When it comes to Norwich, they've got to start developing that a little bit more. And Liam Manning feels a little bit feels very un-Norwich, doesn't it? From what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. But yeah, I think it's going to have to be a big summer for them.
I also think there's a case maybe with Manning, and we'll see what happens if he does get appointed. Is he just the flavour of the month at the moment?
Yeah.
Is there a risk that he's had this good season with Bristol City and now another club's jumped in for him? Maybe I would have given him a bit more time to prove himself at the Championship before making a big move for him. Luckily, Gab, we're moving to a really stable club next. Watford finished 14th. Incredibly, Tom Cleverley overperformed massively in the first half of the season, but in 2025 I've got down 20 points from 23 matches to end the season, the worst in the Championship. Obviously, another manager we have to talk about, not there anymore. They've gone for Paolo Pezzolano. I know pretty much nothing about him, a few promotions to his name abroad. I'm concerned about Watford again, but a relatively positive season? I don't know.
Well, you can't. They've not really got anything to build on now because they've completely ripped it up and gone for another person again.
What, Watford? No, it doesn't sound like them.
Rinse and repeat.
What I'm slightly apprehensive about is that they opened the season ticket sales before they sacked Tom Cleverley, because I think the owners thought that there'd be people who wouldn't buy season tickets if they knew Tom Cleverley was going. So I feel like there's this sense that the owners don't actually have an awful lot of respect or care for how the fans think, and because if they respected what fans wanted, they'd have stuck with Tom Cleverley. They'd have said, you've delivered with a bottom six spotmate squad, a playoff challenge this season. We know we didn't have the depth to deal with it, but we look at the number of players that have improved this season, like Imran Louaza, like Quadro Bar, who came out of nowhere, like Matty Pollock. I think there's been a lot of positive
Chat for Tadze as well.
Chat for Tadze's been brilliant.
Vata, they've got some decent forwards.
Exactly, yeah. And so, yeah, I feel like there's a massive disconnect between the ownership regime and the fan base, and I don't know how sustainable that is for a club to succeed when the chasm is that big.
I understand it, but I also understand why they've got rid of him. If you're the worst team in the league over an entire second half of the season and you are seeing the trend going downwards, and you've got the summer to make a change, it's the right time to do it, isn't it, Conor? Here am I defending the Watford board for sacking another manager. I just feel like if this isn't a 5-game losing spell, this is the worst team in the league for the second half of the season.
Yeah. Did you not rate Cleverley?
I think he did very well for the first half of the season. I think what he did had a connection with the fans at Watford, which is very hard to build, and I think that was worth keeping. But I don't think you can make excuses for that kind of form with some of the players we've mentioned. Yeah, and it's that club as well, isn't it? There's never, ever going to be any sort of long-term stability. It's that brutal. It really is. They've been, how long have they been like this now for Gabe? 15, 20 years? It feels like it's just a reoccurring thing. They've had massive success in that period as well. I just wonder with Cleverley, I think it's bang on with what Gab said in terms of developing players, especially with the ones that I've just listed off there, who have a real high trajectory, in my personal opinion anyway. Loser and Czech for Tadze in particular. You could argue they're Premier League players now. I wonder if Cleverley would have been the best for their career. Another chop and change. It's a little bit like, what now? And I just wonder how much that interrupts a young player's career. But I also want to say, I think Cleverley will be a good pickup
I think he'll be a really good pickup when it comes to a championship side, to be honest.
I think if you're committing to somebody like Tom Cleverley, let's take your argument that it's all about the results and the bottom line and for a half season. I get that. But then appoint somebody who's maybe more experienced as opposed to somebody who's learning their craft. Whereas Tom Cleverley's right at the start of his managerial career, I think he was on the books as a player within the last year or two. So you've got to give him a little bit of wiggle room and give him the opportunity to grow with a football club. But I almost feel silly saying that because that's never been how Watford have.
Yeah, it's a really good point because what were they expecting at the start of the season?
Well, I thought they'd go down.
Yeah.
I thought Watford would go down at the start of the season.
20th I had them.
I think we all had them in the bottom 8 and they've not finished in the bottom 8. They finished 14th and they were in the playoff pitch for a while. So
and that's why you look at the ownership and I wonder what your expectation was, because surely your expectation was near the bottom. So effectively, I know it's not been great in the second half of the season, but has he overachieved?
Yeah, he certainly has overachieved. It's very, very interesting. It's interesting to see. They're looking for the golden goose, aren't they? The manager who just bang straight into the Premier League and they've pulled it off and they look really clever. I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't know much about the new manager at all. 15th gap, QPR. Marty Cifuentes, hit and miss. Obviously a very, very, very poor start. They stuck with him, got them out of danger, and they've got a reasonable squad, haven't they? How do you feel about 15th for QPR this season?
I think there's been a lot of challenges for QPR in terms of that they felt like a club that's been recovering from mistakes of the past for a long time. I think that the slight apprehension I have is that their CEO, Christian Neri, is one of the youngest in his position in the world. They're very analytics-led with the way they recruit, and sometimes there's a compromise there in terms of missing that little bit of footballing experience to help somebody like Cifuentes. But I also think that he's done really well to develop players like Jonathan Varane in midfield has come on a lot this season. I would say I think Steve Cook on the other end of the age spectrum has been such an important centre half for them this year. Jimmy Dunn as well at right back has had a great season. So I think Cifuentes has done well to get the best out of what I would call a bottom end squad.
I think they'll do really well to keep hold of Jimmy Dunn in the summer, and that'll be a big one as well. I can see Sheffield United lurking again after the January window. One to keep an eye on. He's
had a very, very good season indeed. Conor, I'll come to you. 2 promoted teams who both stayed up, 16th and 17th, Portsmouth and Oxford. Massive, massive successes for both of them.
Yeah, hugely. You stay in the Championship. You've done an exceptional job, but I think Portsmouth under Mousinho have been exceptional. Really good, really strong home record as well at Fratton Park. The basics that you want to get sorted when you're coming up from League One, difficult to beat at home. And a structure of which teams don't want to face you. Leeds United, we took 1 point off them this year. They were difficult in both legs, but I know a lot of teams struggled against Portsmouth. They've done exactly what they set out to do at the start of the season. Mousinho last season said that he wanted to make them tough to beat, but still work on the things that they were good at in League One, which was being dynamic out wide. Murphy's been exceptional. They've had a really good season. Oxford, on the other hand, I don't really know what more to say about them, to be honest. I had them at rock bottom, and they've just been plucky, but with quality as well, exuberant, and they've also taken some massive scalps this season, which obviously the biggest one being Sheffield United, Gabs.
Yeah, I think I think these reliable Championship managers are so valuable, and that's the difference really for Oxford United between them and what's happened to Plymouth Argyle this season. I think appointing Gary Rowett, as much as I would have criticised the decision to get rid of Des Buckingham at the time, I think appointing Gary Rowett, that steady hand, the work of Brannigan in midfield has been brilliant for them. Matos on loan from Chelsea, Moore at the back as well has been rock solid. I think Jamie Cummings in goal has been really good. And yeah, it's just that consistent. Hellick as well. January edition. Kieran Brown, yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just those rock solid foundations that have really impressed me with regards to Oxford United.
We like seeing League One teams come up and stay up and do a good job. I think it's also worth mentioning, I think Portsmouth had 1 win in their first 12 or something, were rock bottom of the table, and they've come back and finished 16th.
Yeah.
What a season they've had. Let's move quickly on to Stoke, Gab. They've finished between 14th and 18th now for the last 7 seasons. Remarkable consistency, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not a positive season though, is it?
I think with Stoke City, they need to condense the squad a bit. They've got 28 players in their senior squad. I'm not quite sure how many are out of contract, but I think they've got lots of players who could contribute, but they need to firm up on a smaller group than the one they've got. They probably need 2/3 of that, and then sort of promote from youth for the rest. I think they've got a lot wrong, possibly in terms of recruitment. I think it's felt a bit scattergun at times. They've recruited Ian Torrance as head of recruitment, who had done some work with Cesc Fabregas at Como 1907. So we'll see whether he can make a difference in that regard, assisting Mark Robins as well, who, a bit like what we've talked about with Gary Rowett, he's a steady hand at championship level. So hopefully they can make some progress. But for me, I think it's about condensing their squad.
I think if we were looking for a pointless answer for championship managers this season, Narcis Palach might have been the correct answer for that one. Derby, Conor. John Eustace, his gamble has paid off, and now it looks like they can move and build forward. But again, all three promoted teams from League One stayed up. Derby have done a very, very good job.
Yeah, 100%. Really good job. And that's just been the sign of the season, really, hasn't it, when it comes to Eustace? Pick him away from a playoff-bound club. Unbelievable bit of teetering there by Derby. He saved them. That was the job MO. Really basic. Moving on to next season. Can he maybe attract some players from Blackburn? Who knows? We'll have to see if he can build up those connections, or utilise those connections. I could see, but we've got down on the notes here the only way is up, and really simple side. That's all I can see for them. Again, I don't see Derby falling back. Really good club, good ownership, and a good manager.
Touched on earlier, didn't you, Gab, about that good ownership? Especially, it'd be interesting to see how they kind of progress moving forward.
Yeah, I think, again, I come back to that theme of reliable championship managers. We've spoken about it with Alex Neil, with I'd probably put Paul Heckingbottom in that category, Mark Robins and Gary Rowett. I think John Eustace is quickly coming into that category as well, because what he's delivered this season, getting Blackburn Rovers on, and the chaos that we associate with them at Ewood Park. He's got them into the playoff picture firmly in there as well, by the way, and right up there with I think they would have been in a similar position to Coventry if he had stayed, and then keeping Derby up from what looked like a really difficult position as well. I think he's a very good adaptable manager in that you can throw him into any situation and he'll make the best of it. And I think that flexibility and adaptability and the people skills to bring everyone together and being really humble and down to earth, I think he's done a fantastic job this season, both at Blackburn Rovers and Derby County.
He was my manager of the season.
Always difficult to beat as well.
Yeah.
Nightmare to beat, which is always a positive.
Yeah, my manager of the season over both clubs. I think he's overperformed massively compared to what he walked in at. Preston, 20th place, just avoided the drop. Gab, absolutely shocking this season, really poor. I didn't expect much from them. I expected them to kind of be around the relegation picture.
Yeah.
They're usually quite a solid mid-table side. Sacked Ryan Lowe after one game, of course, or they parted company. Paul Heckingbottom kind of struggled to get them going after that FA Cup quarter-final defeat to Aston Villa.
Yeah, because up till that point, they looked set to finish about 14th, didn't they?
Yep.
They'd drawn a lot of games. They hadn't actually lost many from when Paul Heckingbottom was appointed around August time. Up till that game, it was just a lot of draws and steadily climbing the table. And then, the Aston Villa game that they lost, and then they went on this run of 4 or 5 straight defeats. And I think it was a couple of games before the end of the season, Paul Heckingbottom really sort of let loose on his squad, partly because there's a lot of out of contracts in the summer and there's a big rebuild, but he possibly needed some of those players to sort of finish the job, which they did in the end. But I think it's looking like a big overhaul of players for Preston North End, and I think recruitment's going to be key for them under Heckingbottom.
I certainly worry about them moving forward. Hope Heckingbottom can kind of sort them out. Hull City, we have to talk about the owner, don't we, I guess, Conor, because he's hired Ruben Sellers to come in and do a job and save them. Ruben Sellers has done really well and done that and got them over the line, and now he's gone.
You're baffled by it, aren't you? It's what he's got out of a lot of the young players at Hull as well this season. The MO was to keep them up. He's kept them up. You feel sorry for Sellers, don't you?
Yeah.
He's had a rough ride, hasn't he?
But I feel sorry for him in one way, but I also feel like he's boosted his reputation at Hull. I think he's in the market now for a championship, or it's certainly at the similar level. So I think he'll get some fantastic offers. He's done some brilliant work at Southampton, get great work to develop so many talented young players at Reading and lay some real foundations there in difficult circumstances, because his tenure was before the Cohig took charge, and then to keep Hull City up as well. So I like Sellés. I think that, for championship clubs that are after a head coach that can coach a really energetic, high pressing style and develop young players,
imagine being a player at Hull, though. Imagine being a player where you finally clicked with a manager and you think you're getting some...
Joe Gelhardt.
Yeah. But you think you found something, and then you have to start from scratch yet again. It's kind of the Watford issue, but worse.
Really tough, and as Gab quite rightly said, is going to come on to his playing style in a second. But it is the dynamic, enthralling, pressy style as well. Norwich.
Yeah.
Would be a nice fit for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to come on to the 3 relegated teams as well. A bit of negativity around. Obviously, the biggest shock of the season. None of us saw it coming. I think I had them finishing second if we're doing our pre-season predictions, Conor. Gab, Luton Town got relegated.
Yeah, 5th for me. So that shows you how far we were off.
So do tune in for our pre-season predictions next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think... There was clearly a burnout for Rob Edwards. He looked exhausted by the end of his tenure, so clearly they needed change there. And then I think Matt Bloomfield found himself on the wrong side of results early on. I think they took 3 points from his first 8 games, so that plunged them further into mire even more so. And then I think the results actually massively picked up from them, and they had one of the best defensive records in the league outside the top sides. But it was kind of counterbalanced by a lot of the other teams around them also picking up. So I think that's a big issue that kind of led to Luton Town for 49 points not being enough for them. So I think... but I think Matt Bloomfield's the right man to lead the rebuild in League One. I think they'll have the biggest budget at that level, and I would see them bouncing back, but a difficult couple of years for them, that's for sure.
Yeah, really tough indeed. Plymouth Argyle, they finished 23rd and didn't finish bottom, Conor. Wayne Rooney got them relegated. That decision to hire him, and then the decision to hold on to him for so long, when people could see the writing was on the wall for weeks and weeks. Ultimately, despite Muslic's good work at the end of the season, he wasn't given enough time.
No, it wasn't. Of course he wasn't. And who Muslic brought in as well was massively beneficial, wasn't it, to Plymouth, of course, made them a little bit more difficult to beat. But it's the Wayne Rooney effect, isn't it? I don't know how long we're going to keep seeing this. I was a couple of rumours earlier on, seeing that, saying that Blackburn might be interested in him if Ishmael was relieved of his duties. Obviously, rumours again. We're in silly season now, aren't we? But he's got a fantastic agent, hasn't he, Gab? Wayne Rooney. But yeah, it feels like unlucky Plymouth. But I think it'd be interesting to see what happens with Muslic now. It really will. But if they're able to keep hold of him, I think it'll be a good season in League One again. But positives to end on. I thought, even when Leeds went down there, they were good. Good team with some exciting talents down there as well. So
absolutely,
yeah, I'm encouraged by the people skills and leadership qualities that Miron Muslic has displayed. I think you can see that there's a real aura there. I think you can see that he can build a team that's very strong against the ball from a pressing point of view, and also getting the best out of Ryan Hardy and Mustafa Bundy. So definitely some positives for Plymouth Argyle to take down to League One as they go for a rebuild. They've appointed David Fox, I think, as the new director of football there, and had a bit of a rejig in terms of operational side of things. So we'll see how they get on in League One.
Bundy will score a boatload down there as well.
At that level,
he's going to get a move. He's getting a move, surely. He can't be playing in League One. Gab, we'll finish by talking about the worst team in the league this season, bottom of the table. Really few positives, I feel, for Cardiff City.
Well, on the one hand, it's felt like this has been coming for Cardiff City, hasn't it, Simon? Because for a long time, I've not really rated the operational structure at Cardiff City, and I think there's been some big question marks there. In another way, they've not actually finished in the bottom 6 recently. They've tended to finish a little bit higher. They've not actually spent much time in the bottom 3 over the last 3 years. And even this season, they often seem to be around 20th for much of the campaign and then just plummeted at the end. I think definitely a big rethink for the club. Definitely need to restructure. Definitely need a bit more operational nous upstairs. Take away the reliance on agents. So definitely a rethink required for Cardiff City, and I think the appointments that they make is going to be huge.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult for Cardiff, isn't it, to move forward? But they probably needed it in a bit of a reset. Thanks for joining us for the 1 to 24s. The last thing we're going to do on today's show, though, is talk about 3 promoted teams from League One, because now we know that Charlton Athletic are joining Birmingham and Wrexham. And Gab, you're smiling over there because Birmingham City are back in the Championship. I mean, expectations, I was looking at the odds this morning, expectations very, very high for Birmingham, already 5th or 6th favourites for promotion, and with the money that could be spent, rightly so?
I think so, yeah. I think there's definitely, the excitement is definitely justified. I think we'll be somewhere in the top 10 next season. I think we have the potential to do an Ipswich. Whether we will, I'm being a little bit cautious about at the moment. But I think what's really exciting for me is Chris Davis. And yes, he's had an enormous financial advantage this season, but at the same time, there's... when he speaks, you listen. He commands respect and authority. I think he's been able to stamp a clear style of play on this squad straight away, which doesn't just require money, it requires good coaching as well. And I think there's a really good group of players coming up to the Championship with a very ambitious owner in Tom Wagner, and a willingness to invest as well. So there's definite excitement. I think we will be in the Premier League in the next 3 to 5 years. I think we've got a chance of doing it next season, but I'm also enjoying the feel-good factor around the club because it's something we've not had for a long time.
As a team that's trying to finish in the playoffs as well, I just hate seeing Birmingham and teams from League One shouldn't be competing with us when we're trying to get in the Premier League. You stay down in 17th. I'm worried about Birmingham. I think they've got a real chance. Conor, Wrexham as well. I mean, we all know the story. They've gone 3 promotions in 3 years. I wouldn't put them quite on the same level as Birmingham with their 111 points in terms of the impact they could have at the top end of the Championship. But I certainly don't think they'll be in relegation danger. I mean, look at some of the rumours flying around with the players they might be bringing in.
Yeah, Kearney, Windass, another one. Yeah, you kind of look at Birmingham and you think, I look at their squad and I think there's a lot of those players who could definitely acclimatise to the Championship, which gives them a massive advantage already. Wrexham, let's not underestimate the Championship here as well. It is a dog-eat-dog league. It will be tougher next season as well. I keep saying this. I think if your likes of Birmingham and Wrexham came in this year, it could have been a very, very different story in terms of pushing up that division. Birmingham, it's the financial clout, isn't it? And measuring that against the rest of the Championship, can they compete with Birmingham? Obviously, they won't have that many restrictions either, just coming into the league. But Wrexham are an interesting one. Don't really know how to judge Wrexham, to be honest.
But you know what it is, Conor? We've never seen anything like Wrexham before. We've never seen a team win. Firstly, I'm not sure anyone's ever won 3 consecutive promotions to the Championship, certainly not in the modern era, but also and be a global name that's Hollywood. So it's, in terms of the financial resources, it's enormous what Wrexham have got, but they've also got a unique challenge in that whereas if you've stayed in the same league, you can gradually build a squad that can grow together in a really sustainable way. Wrexham are almost having to build another squad and almost trying to keep up somehow with signing new players, and they've got the money to do that. But whether that sort of synergy is going to be there in the way that I think Birmingham have probably got a group that's ready to go straight into the top 10.
And this is the thing, you do feel with Wrexham like there are going to be a whole lot of literally Hollywood signings. So we've just mentioned, Kearney there and Windass. And you wonder, I think with Birmingham, it's going to be consistent. I think with Birmingham, there's going to be really good additions, but there's already players that can work. Big one that stands out to me, obviously, is Jay Stansfield, that are going to work, in my opinion anyway. Wrexham, I have no idea what's going to happen. It could be a complete rejig of 9 or 10 players in this transfer window. They could try with these Hollywood signings, and you've just no idea how that's going to work, really, and how is Parkinson going to be able to deal with that?
It's the difficulties the rapid rise presents, because they've only just proved that they were League One players.
And the pressure that comes with that.
And a lot of them were signed,
Well, they're either going to have an enormous squad that becomes almost too many to manage, or they're going to have to pay to offload players, and clearly that's not going to be a problem because the funds are enormous. But I think it is going to bring its own challenges. That how much do you stick to the synergy of a group that's won 3 consecutive promotions and have a stable culture and squad, and how much do you say, no, we're going to rip it up again and try and compete towards the top of the Championship? Really fascinating to see what happens there. So really from a neutral point of view, they're one of the most curious clubs.
Unpredictable, aren't they?
Exactly.
To get on Disney Plus and the Wrexham documentary, all you have to say is Wrexham are going to get relegated, and that's all you have to say. And then I'll be on the next series. There you go. That's how we do it.
Wrexham are going to get relegated.
The last team, and massive congratulations to Nathan Jones and Charlton Athletic back in the Championship. Gab, Nathan Jones has been utterly brilliant. We know he has it in his locker to perform. He's done a really good job with Charlton, and they're back up.
Yeah, I think he did wonderful work at Luton and laid some, along with John Steele before him, laid some real foundations for the rise up the leagues that they had across both stints. And he struggled to replicate that at other clubs, both at Stoke and Southampton. And there's maybe been the question mark about how he's handled different profiles of players at maybe the higher levels. But going back to Charlton League One, a club that he coached at about 12 years ago, I think he's brought a real energy to the club. I think it can be a double-edged sword with Nathan Jones, because on the one hand, he's so passionate and so animated. There's
preying on the touchline, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And there's going to be players who want to run through brick walls for him, and clearly that's most of the Charlton players. I think sometimes it can be a little bit, he can take the attention, and I think he enjoys that side of it as well. And sometimes that can be a double-edged sword, perhaps. But I think in the main, it's a net positive, because he rubs off on his players and really fills them with that appetite and enthusiasm, and that's made a difference for Charlton.
And from a psychology perspective as well, it's taking the pressure off his players as well, isn't it? When the focus is on him,
like a Mourinho,
like a Mourinho,
yeah.
And you look at the smart recruitment of someone like Matty Godden, picked up from the Championship, goes down, scores 18, 19 goals, really important.
Well, funny enough, Matty Godden wasn't actually the go-to man in the first half of the season. There were other strikers starting ahead of him, and I was thinking, was he going to be offloaded? And then second half of the season, he's absolutely caught fire. And I think what I really like about Charlton is that they've got really solid midfield with Conor Coventry, who sort of ticks things over, Greg Doherty, who's a real dynamo in there, and Luke Berry, who often starts as a real pressing machine. So you got a lot of really solid foundations there, and then the creativity and pace and skill comes in the wide areas and the fullbacks. So I think they've got a lovely balance about them, Charlton, and intrigued to see how they go in the Championship.
Absolutely. Look forward to welcoming Charlton, Wrexham and Birmingham to the Championship. We'll talk about them more next season. I'm going to ask you a question on the spot that we haven't prepared for to end the show. So here we go. Because I'm not going to see you for a few months before we do our next show, I want one wild Championship prediction to happen before the start of next season. You mentioned maybe Ruben Sellers to Norwich, and I know they might appoint a manager, but something along those lines. Have either of you got any? Can I talk a little bit longer to give you some thinking time? Something crazy you think might happen? I've got one. I'll start you off so you have more thinking time. Wrexham pay 50 grand a week to one player. Make a signing on 50 grand a week.
I think that's fair.
I think before we go to Gab, I'll come up with a unique one here. I think Ruben Sellers might go to Norwich. There you go. That's mine.
Yeah, all right, that's fine. I'll take that.
I think Coventry City might sign a left back from the Spanish second tier.
Oh, it's very
football manager, Gab.
Excellent stuff. Thank you, Conor, for your work this season. Enjoy the Premier League. Hope you enjoy. It feels very come down with me, lad. Enjoy the Premier League. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Gab. Thank you as always. You'll be back next season to discuss more Championship action. Make sure you like and subscribe, because we will be back next season with more shows, more Championship knowledge to bring you. It's been a really fun season. Well done to Leeds United, Burnley and Sunderland for their promotion, and we'll see Birmingham, Wrexham and Charlton in the Championship next season.